Welcome back to Swine TV, Dr. Joe Connor mini series. Today we're going to talk about minimizing economic losses. Welcome back to the program, Dr. Connor.
Thanks, Jim. I'm glad to be part of it.
So when we talk about minimizing economic losses, is there a 5-step plan or implementation that you can offer advice on?
Well, today, Jim, we're going to focus mostly on immunity as it affects economic losses. And immunity and the pig's response to stimulation is actually fascinating and quite key to minimizing cost while improving performance and productivity. And immunity can be either activated through natural exposure, and a good example of that would be rotavirus C, or it can be activated through administration of vaccines. And to some extent, it's helpful, Jim, to customize the program to the individual herd. We try to do things that are similar across herds, but there's differences that need to be addressed. It's also always key to remember that vaccines do not generally prevent infection, but they prevent the economic cost associated with that pathogen or that disease. And then some of the key considerations that I always keep in the back of my mind is the timing. Each antigen has a preferred time for either exposure or vaccine administration. So I break it down into the suckling pig, the growing pig, the sows, and then also categorize the sows for themselves versus protection of their suckling pigs. The second thing that is important is that it requires time for the vaccines to develop effective immunity, whether that's through, again, natural exposure or whether that is through administration. And there is differences between that time for effectiveness, whether it is a modified live vaccine or it is a killed vaccine. And generally, I use 4 weeks for the peak effectiveness after a modified live vaccine and 2 weeks after the second dose of a killed vaccine. So as you think about setting up your program, you keep that in the back of your mind as to when that disease is affecting the pigs themselves. Piglets receive their immunity, first immunity, through colostrum. So those things that improve colostral uptake are then critical in protecting that pig, at least for the first 2 to 6 weeks of their life. At the same time, though, we got to keep in mind that these same maternal antibodies may block some of the vaccines that we would be being tried to administer, so that it can affect our timing and what age we administer those vaccines to the piglets themselves. And Jim, kind of a fascinating thing is that the sow has maternal cells from a specific dam to her specific pigs that can also be stimulated. So there are instances where we would vaccinate suckling pigs at 3 to 5 days of age to take advantage of those maternal cells that would protect the pigs at a younger age or for a longer time period. I always like to avoid vaccinations during the times of stress. And so key ones that come to my mind are certainly the weaning transport stress of that pig, the weaned sow herself. I think we want to avoid administration of vaccines if they would reduce the sow in feed intake even for a single day during that wean to first service interval. And then in the growing gilt in particular, I think it's helpful to avoid administration of vaccines during the time when you're trying to estrus detect or stimulate estrus in those pubertal gilts. And a question, Jim, we often get is, can you administer multiple antigens at the same time? And the answer is yes. You know, we commonly have mixed vaccines. And I think from a practical standpoint, I always revert back that we're being exposed and the pig's being exposed to multiple antigens every day, whether it's dust particles, endotoxins, whatever. And they respond and will respond quite well. So as we consider those, I always like to think of it in this manner, Jim, and that is, yeah, the right pig, so the right age, you know, the right antigen, you know, the right dose, the right administration, the right route of administration, and the right handling of that pig or growing gilt sow is critical to stimulating the immune response that is going to make it effective against that antigen. And it's also, we also want to keep records because we know there's a difference as we look at closeouts. We may find that sometimes we're vaccinating pigs in the face of maternal antibodies that would then contribute to expression of a disease during the growing phase. So linking those time periods together will be, is important.
So Dr. Joe Connor is with us today. He's got some great advice about implementing immunity to focus on using that to minimize economic losses. So with some of the plans that you just discussed, Joe, is there something we haven't considered or need to think outside the box on, or something you hear in the field that's new in this regard?
There's two things, Jim, that come to mind. And one is that there is a cost to vaccine and a cost of vaccination or natural exposure via that labor, but also as the immune system responds, there is a requirement, energy and protein requirement for that. But at the end of the day, the value overcomes that cost. And then the second thing would be is that we do see a nice push forward with mRNA vaccines and DNA vaccines and different routes of administration that likely will be available to the industry in the very near future. And that will improve the effectiveness and hopefully in some cases give more of a core vaccine that would work against different strains, or may allow us to overcome those maternal antibodies that I referenced that dictates today what age we vaccinate pigs. So some exciting things as we go forward.
So Joe, how does biosecurity play into this?
Biosecurity is important because it really influences the vaccine program that you put in place. And so as we match up or think about a customized program, a herd that is high health, high biosecurity, low risk areas would be on a different or maybe a minimal vaccine program compared to one that has low biosecurity and a high area risk.
So we're almost through the summer, Joe. What's new with Dr. Joe Connor?
Well, I think like all other producers, we're still trying to figure out what this market's going to be in 2024. We've got the Pro Farmer Scout Tour going on right now that'll give us some update on the corn and soybean yields, which we're all waiting to see. And then upcoming, we've got the Carthage Veterinary Conference next week, which we continue to be quite excited about. The topics are very timely. Location is quite good here in Quincy, Illinois. And we would just look forward to a lot of communication and interaction that day.
You're speaking at the conference, right, Joe?
Yes, I'm on a panel, so it'll be quite good.
This is great information today, Joe. Thanks again for joining us.
My pleasure.